everybody. It is Friday Eve. Thank you so much for being here. I do want to start with a little bit of breaking news. This whole program will not be about the plane disaster. There is more news as well that I want to cover tonight, but there is a big development. CBS News has just reported that 40 bodies have now been recovered. It is a very sad fact that there are no survivors, and so this will be a story that continues to change based on the recovery process. And this is the sad part of the recovery process. I've got some of the names. I will read them to you because, man, when I saw them, I started to see the groups like families, whole families, partners and husbands and wives. And so I got that for you. That's coming. But there's something else. This is a crime show. And we have always looked at true crime as mystery that needs to be solved, right? And justice that needs to be unearthed. And the airplane crash is no different. I'm not sure if you know this. If you've been around the block, you might, for sure. But when a crash like this happens, they pull every single shred of shrapnel out of the crash site, and they transport it usually to a very big hangar. And they rebuild the wreckage. I am not kidding. It is like a puzzle they put back together, and it is jaw-dropping. Tonight, I'm going to show you some of the most unbelievable recreations from crashes in past. Looks just like this. We're going to go over 3 of them with the guy who is considered a legend in solving aviation mysteries and how they do this forensic puzzle on every single one and how it's going to happen to the one that happened last night. So that is coming in just a moment. And also 30 years this week. 30 years since the opening statements happened in the OJ Simpson trial. I simply can't believe it. Here is a reminder.
Remember these words. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. He don't play by rules.
January 1995, what more could be said? Turns out, maybe a lot. It also turns out there may be more witnesses who we've never heard from, witnesses who say they were there that night and they saw some things. Could they have changed the course of history? Cato Kalin is with me tonight. He's going to talk about what's been discovered, what's coming out in a new Netflix doc, and how it might have changed things for him as well. Also, another massive case in Los Angeles, decades old, the Menendez brothers, today and tomorrow. We're supposed to be so significant. The resentencing hearings. Did you forget? There's been so much that's happened. The LA fires and a new election and, of course, this plane crash. But those first 2 things I mentioned had a huge part in booting these hearings off the schedule. Today and tomorrow did not happen. They are not going to be heard for their resentencing. But I do have the date for you and maybe something even bigger. The guy who just met with one of the brothers at the prison and has all the feedback on what's going on. I'm going to tell you all of that tonight, but first, it's just over 25 hours since this country's deadliest air disaster in almost a quarter century. And you and I have been through enough disasters together, my friends, of every kind, to know that the day after is like a fire hose of facts and revelations and sometimes the conspiracies. In the case of American Eagle Flight 5342 colliding with a U.S. Army Black Hawk over Washington, D.C., the worst and biggest fact was all too apparent early on. And that is that no one on board either aircraft survived this disaster, which means 67 souls, 64 of them on the jet making its final approach from Wichita, and 3 soldiers on the Black Hawk. Tonight, CBS News reporting 40 bodies recovered from the frigid waters of the Potomac. And the D.C. fire chief says he's confident all of those victims will be recovered in time. We've just learned that the airline passengers included 3 students and 6 parents from the Virginia school system. They haven't been identified yet. But we have now confirmed the names of at least 17 people killed, including 2 world champions and 4 up-and-coming stars from the world of figure skating. I want to read the names, beginning with the first officer on that commercial flight, Sam Lilly. Also killed were Melissa Jane Nicandri, Kia Duggins, Oliver Turr, Donna, Peter, Everly, and Lydia Livingston. Everly and Lydia were their teen girls. Mickey Stovall or Mikey Stovall, Tommy Claggett, Steve Johnson, John Boyd, Grace Maxwell, who was a junior at Ohio Cedarville University, Robert Bobby Schrock, Lori Schrock, Ian Epstein, Evgenia Shishkova, and Vadim Naumov, the 1994 world champions in pairs figure skating, Sasha Kirzanov, a figure skating coach, as well as Gina Hahn and Spencer Lane, and their mothers Jean Hahn and Christine Lane. Gina and Spencer were members of the Skating Club of Boston, and Shishkova and Naumov were their coaches. They were heading home from a training camp that was held after the U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Wichita, and they were scheduled to change planes in Washington, D.C. The Skating Club of Boston is what launched Nancy Kerrigan to Olympic glory, and this was Nancy today, fighting through tears as she processed what happened last night.
Much like everyone here has been saying, is not sure how to process it. Oh, shoot, I'm sorry.
No, okay.
Which is why I'm here. Many of you may know my husband's my agent, and he keeps getting calls to do interviews, and I thought that was weird. I didn't feel like it was right to be home and doing interviews for this. And so I called Elin, and I'm like, what are you doing? I think we just all need to go together. And she said, let me call my mom. And so we're like, okay, we'll meet you in an hour. And we just wanted to be here and be part of our community. I've never seen anyone love skating as much as these two, and that's why I think it hurts so much. And I mean, everything. Tenley's always here supporting the kids, and anytime I've been able to be here and watch them grow, the kids here really work hard. Their parents work hard to be here. But I feel for the athletes, the skaters, their families, but anyone that was on that plane, not just the skaters, because it's just such a tragic event. And we've been through tragedies before as Americans, as people, and we are strong. And I guess it's how we respond to it. And so my response was to be with people I care about and I love, and I needed support. So that's why I'm here. And I don't know, a little bit at a time. I think it's a shock. I wasn't woken up in the morning and saw it. I was watching like all night. So I probably look tired, but, and then when you find out, you know some of the people on the plane, it's even a bigger blow. We just wish them well, and like the families, the courage and the strength to make the next steps. I don't know how. You look at people go through tragedies and you wonder, how do they do it? I don't know, but we're so strong. Somehow we have a reservoir to dig from, and each one of them are strong enough to get through this somehow. It will take time, but look beside you. There's somebody that cares, and I don't know, tell people around you that you love them because you just never know. Don't forget to say it.
Could you reflect on Vadim and Evgenia, what kind of coaches they were, and did you work with them?
I never worked with them. I mean, we were at the Olympics together, but in '94 I was kind of busy myself and sort of separated from a lot of what was going on. But I mean, I've seen them a lot of times here and there over the years, but everything you've heard of them, like maybe being a little tough, but with a smile on their face, and like anytime I walked in, oh hi, it's so good to see you. It's like always welcoming and happy to see one another, and like so just to walk in here and not see that is, I think, would be very strange for everybody that comes here, especially those that are here day in and day out, and it's going to be hard. And I always feel like, what am I doing? I don't come to the skating club all the time, but it was the only place I thought I should be right now. I did not expect this, neither did Tenley. I'm not sure, but we just wanted to be here with each other and for for Doug. We watched Doug's interview, and
that helped us.
It did help. Thank you. Yeah.
Unbelievable, poignant moments from Nancy Kerrigan. And, you know, it's kind of hard not to harken back to a plane crash in 1961 that killed the entire U.S. figure skating team. Flight 548 crashed in Belgium while the team was on its way to the World Championships in Prague. Cause of that disaster was never confirmed. But the search for answers in this crash began almost as soon as the wreckage hit the water. Nothing, I repeat, nothing is known for certain yet, and probably won't be known for weeks, maybe months. But we do know that investigators have three distinct areas of interest: the plane, the helicopter, and the air traffic control tower at Reagan National. Tonight, the Washington Post is reporting that just 1 day before the mid-air collision, another airliner from Republic Airways had to abort its first attempt to land in D.C. because a helicopter was in its way. The Post says that that jet made a second approach and landed perfectly safely. Gathering all of these facts is the job of the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, which had a go team on the banks of the Potomac before the sun came up this morning. But facts aren't the only things that the NTSB collects. As you may know from other crashes, these are the people who make it their mission to recover every single piece of the puzzle. And I mean that quite literally. From the biggest jagged chunks of a fuselage to the tiniest wires from a cockpit instrument, NTSB investigators recover it all, what they can. And then they do this. They put it all back together again. Don't ask, but they get incredible results. They reassemble crashed wreckage. And then they look for clues as to why it happened. And right now, I am really lucky to be joined by someone who knows that process inside and out. Forensics of flight. Greg Feith is not just an NTSB veteran. He is a quote-unquote legend, a former senior air safety investigator, and for 8 years, the GO team's leader. In 2014, he was inducted as a member of the Living Legends of Aviation. He has investigated more than 2,500 crashes all around the world. I've also been interviewing you, Mr. Feith, since the 90s. So thank you so much. You were the #1 guest I wanted to speak with today, mostly about right now. I'm going to get to the puzzle solving in the hangars because I am fascinated by that. But I want to know right now, apart from the absolute priority of recovering the other 27 bodies, what are they doing with those black boxes that they have recovered, and how are they getting every scrap out of the water?
Well, Ashleigh, first off, thank you for that nice introduction. It is my job, and it has been my career and my passion for now 46 years. Going into disaster sites like this, my job, like others like me, investigators, we see the worst side of aviation, but we try to take the worst side and create the positive, the enhancements to safety through the process of accident investigation. And it is a tedious job. It is a meticulous job in the end, but it's a time-consuming and resource-intensive job as well. And that's why the chairman today had said that the media needs to give the board time to be able to collect all the facts, conditions, and circumstances from a variety of different sources. It's more than just data collection, because once you get that information, now you have to process it, but then you have to put it into context, and you have to understand what is causal versus contributory. And the wreckage, as you talked about, is going to be a key piece, because in retrieving as much of the wreckage as we can, the board will lay it out in a large facility, presumably a hangar, to try and understand the crash dynamics. How did the helicopter and the fixed-wing regional jet come together? How did they strike each other? What impact marks? What transfer marks? Because they're looking for the question and the answer of, why didn't the helicopter see the fixed-wing regional jet? Or why didn't the regional jet see the helicopter? Were there obscurations? Were there design
That's what we want to know.
Characteristics, right? Yes.
And so I'm the layman, and that's what I want to know. Yeah. But I'm wondering, what are you looking for right now on those on that cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder that they retrieved today? What would you want to hear?
The CVR and the FDR are going to provide guidance and direction to the rest of the investigation. We have a lot of information like you talked about. There is a lot of information, and even the chairman said, yeah, we have a lot of information. It hasn't been vetted. We don't know the validity of that information. The cockpit voice recorder from both the regional jet and presumably the helicopter soon will provide that direction, will provide that validation, or at least determine what's fact and what's fiction. That will help the board's investigators spend their resources in those subject areas you talked about. Air traffic control is a major issue in this particular instance, but communication between cockpit, between the pilots and the air traffic controller, the traffic controller's staffing, was that an issue? That's going to be able to be vetted by cockpit voice recorder information and give a path for the investigators.
So now let's talk about this just remarkable process that, folks who've been around for a while and covered a few crashes like I have, I'm mesmerized by what you do after the fact. I don't know how long it takes you, but you do put those pieces back together. And I want to roll some pictures of what some of the top ones, that I know you've worked on and that I've worked on. And I want to start with United Airlines Flight 292. This one was in 1989 in July, Denver to Chicago. It crashed in Iowa, and 112 people died. 184 people survived, but this was a massive aircraft. Talk to me about the reassembly and what you discovered in this.
Well, United 232 was one of those accidents that, of course, with the flight crew, they were able to get basically a damaged aircraft on the ground to the point where there were survivors. But we had to try and figure out, and the board did a very good job with the folks, the subject matter experts, structure systems, power plants folks, in putting the aircraft, the prominent parts of the aircraft back together. We knew that we had an engine failure, catastrophic engine failure. We knew that the hydraulic systems were all compromised in that aircraft. We had to understand why. What happened when that engine let go to sever all of the hydraulic lines? And through bringing all of these pieces, the critical pieces of the tail section of the aircraft, into position, so that investigators could get a better understanding of how the failure cut through the fuselage, compromised the hydraulic system, we were able to determine that it was a design issue, that now going forward, you won't find all three or all four hydraulic systems bundled right next to each other. They have an A system, a B system, a C system that are spread out throughout the aircraft, so that if you do have a catastrophic failure, you won't cut all the hydraulic lines or even all of the electrical systems.
Okay, so the next one, and I think this might be the one where I met you, was 1996. It was the Value Jet Flight 592 crash in the Everglades in Florida. This happened Miami to Atlanta, and 110 people, everyone on board was killed. I still can't believe that any of the detritus was recovered, but there it is, being reassembled, and you discovered that it was mislabeled hazardous cargo. How?
We had to there was a lot of phases to this investigation. We had to get enough wreckage out of the Florida Everglades to understand. We knew we had an in-flight fire. We had an idea of where that in-flight fire had begun as far as being in the forward cargo hold, but we had to understand what the source of that fire was. It could have been electrical because there had been some issues with very high amperage circuit breakers. We didn't know if that was the origin. And it wasn't until about the third week during a progress meeting when one of our investigators, a human factors investigator, happened to be looking at the manifest, the cargo manifest, and asked a question of the group, what are these 144 oxygen canisters? That changed the entire focus of the investigation from electrical now to what was being carried. And what was being carried were those oxygen generators that you use that are stored up in the PSU or the passenger service unit that provide oxygen. They were being carried as illegal hazardous material because they're volatile. Yes, when they fire off, it's a chemical reaction. And unfortunately, while it does create oxygen, it also creates high heat. There was a spontaneous combustion fire in the forward cargo hold, and there was no way to put it out because at that time, cargo holds were not required to have firefighting equipment in them. And unfortunately, we lost the aircraft.
I have 1 minute left, but I have to get to the big one, which is TWA Flight 800, 1996. 230 people, everyone on board killed. The flight took off from New York. It was headed to Rome, but it crashed into the Atlantic Ocean just offshore. And Greg, this is what I'm shocked that they could collect this from the Atlantic Ocean. Look at the recovery and the reassembly of Flight 800. And they were able to determine probable cause as flammable fuel vapors. But maybe more importantly, they were able to determine not a missile, because that's what people were screaming about for weeks.
Absolutely. And the board had processes. They had previous knowledge on how to recover aircraft from deep sea areas like the ocean. So we were able to recover enough wreckage using side-scan sonar to map the wreckage, pull the pieces, and then bring them into a hangar. And again, reconstruct. We called it the Jurassic Giant, just because we had to create this big framework. And we had a great group of board subject matter experts that was able to put the bulk of the wreckage back together and demonstrate that there was no missile, because there were no characteristic missile firings like you would see in like MH17. What we did find, what the process found, was that there was a short circuit in the center fuel tank with one of the fuel probes that fired off fuel vapor. When that vapor finally fired off, it didn't explode, it just overpressurized that center fuel tank. When the center fuel tank let go, it compromised the structure, especially in the area of the fuel tanks and the wings. And that was the big fireball, the explosion, and the dissection of the aircraft. But it was very diligent work on the part of the NTSB subject matter experts to really find that out.
Forensics, puzzle solving to the nth degree. Greg Feith, it's really good to see you. Thank you so much for this.
Great to see you,
Thank you for your decades of service. Really appreciate it. You take care.
Thank you, you too.
Coming up next, 30 years is a very long time to relitigate a murder trial, even if it is the trial of the century. But a new docuseries on Netflix says there are witnesses to the OJ Simpson case that we have never heard before. You heard me. People who saw things the night Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman were stabbed to death, and whose stories may have changed history. So why have they been silent all these years? After the break, one of the star witnesses from the case, Cato Kalin, joins me. Know what 30 years feels like? Close your eyes and picture the opening statements of the OJ Simpson double murder trial. You can see it, right? It's like it was yesterday. Now open your eyes, because that was 30 years ago this week. And the trial would last until October. October. And I don't have to tell you the verdict. That is all ancient history now, right? Surely there can't be any more new bombshells or smoking guns this many decades later. The defendant himself is now dead. Or are there? Because Netflix says you bet. They just dropped a docuseries featuring people who say that they saw things that should have been introduced in that infamous trial, but never were. Check it out.
No one's not gonna beat the shit. My brother was returning Nicole's glasses and was slaughtered to death.
I was the last person that saw OJ before the murders.
There was more evidence than I had ever seen in my life.
A lot of witnesses didn't testify.
I recognized his voice.
I witnessed him discarding the murder weapon.
I've seen a lot of the evidence ignored.
Nobody could anticipate what would happen next.
I am pleased now to welcome Cato Kalin back to the show. In 1994, Cato was OJ's house guest and one of the star prosecution witnesses at what we then called the trial of the century. Cato, thanks so much for coming back. It's good to see you. I'm a little alarmed about this new revelation. Who are these witnesses?
Well, before I even start, I want to say my heart goes out to the family, the victims, of course, the D.C. plane crash. So I just want to start with that my heart goes out to that, because it's horrific and saddening. And but back to your question, Ashleigh, is one of the witnesses was named Skip Junis, and he was on the podcast I do with Tom Zenner called 1 Degree of Scandalous. He saw OJ in the limo, and he recognized OJ because he was getting out the limo, and his wife worked for American Airlines for handling celebrities, and he saw his hand go into a garbage can after getting out of there, about to the elbow. And when he had done our show, and so I had goosebumps. I had the spine-tingling feeling of, why wasn't this guy called in as a witness? And then you got Jill Shively. Jill, who also is on the podcast, sees OJ with his lights off in the Bronco, running a red light, almost crashing into her. And the amazing thing is, Jill remembered the license plate number without writing it down. She knew it. So she called it in. So there's already a record of it being OJ Simpson coming back from off Bundy. So you assume it's coming from the scene of the crime. It's just two of the most powerful witnesses. I thought, the crime in Brentwood, coming back off Bundy, that she was almost hit by his car, and she heard the voice of him yelling at the other person that almost hit him. And I was like, how could this not been in the trial?
So, okay, to be clear, Jill Shively says she recognizes OJ driving a white Bronco, and just FYI, Al Cowling had a white Bronco too, so don't think that OJ didn't have one. They had matching white Broncos. She says that was near about a half mile from the Brentwood scene, and that, she nearly got into an accident with him, and that this was sort of in the realm of time that the murder might have happened. And Skip Junis, you mentioned, this was actually at LAX. And he said this was sometime around 11:30 that night. He gets out of a limo at LAX. And that's significant because he wouldn't have been in Chicago. He would have been in LA. So why didn't these people get heard? Why are we talking about them now and not then?
Exactly. I wish I knew the answer. I suppose it's because the prosecution was already, establishing their case and putting, step A, B, C, and maybe that wasn't part of the plan to put them in there. How? I have no idea. They're such credible people, too. I've met them and talked to them, and it's amazing that Skip was in his Miata behind the limo at LAX at that time, and someone going into a garbage can, but not just throwing something in, putting their down by the elbow, putting something in to the garbage can. And you can think of what that might be. Is it the murder weapon or not? But, no. Have you ever thrown out something in a garbage by putting your hand down? You want to get dirty? No. You just toss it out. And Jill, just knowing that get the license plate number and knowing that it was OJ and hearing his voice yelling out of the car at that time. Actually, I think this goes on because I was a big part with the timeline. And this shows you everything is about a timeline, and that it just matches perfectly with the timeline. And OJ's dead now. We'll never know.
We'll never know. But I will say this: Marsha Clark apparently didn't want Jill's story because Jill had sold it to hard copy. Jill says that she regrets every day of her life. She's had guilt ever since. And Skip Junis says he called prosecutors. No one ever called him back. And says that later he was told they didn't think that his story could be corroborated, which is just shocking. I have like 5 seconds left, but I literally 5 seconds left. Would it have altered the course of history, Cato?
Yeah, I think so. I think history was coming off the Rodney King case. I think OJ, I saw the jurors, and I think in my heart that he was going to be innocent no matter what. So as far as changing history, I can't answer that. I do know one thing. I live for today and paying it forward and always making sure my present, my future is going to be the best and best for everybody else. And that's all we can do.
Well, it's a new Netflix docuseries. I can't wait to watch it, and I always love having you. Thank you, Cato. It's good to see you.
I'm binging on Sunday with my wife to watch it. See ya.
All right. Take care. Cato Kalin joining us live tonight. Mid-90s were big. Big years for murder trials in L.A. OJ's happened right in the middle of Eric and Lyle Menendez's two trials, the trials for killing their parents. They got life without parole, but now those sentences are up for a second look. And that look was supposed to happen today. I'll tell you why it didn't, and if it ever will, and maybe more importantly, what the brothers are saying about it. An author fresh from a visit to the prison is live with me next. If I were Eric and Lyle Menendez, I'd be pretty eager to get into a courtroom. which is weird because that was the last place they ever wanted to be. But they had a hearing scheduled for today and tomorrow, resentencing hearings, which could have gotten them sprung. These hearings have been postponed a few times, right? First was because of the election. Their guy was out, new guy is in. He needs more time to investigate the case. Pushed to this week. LA wildfires, now throwing everything, into disarray. And now we're looking at maybe March. But I'll tell you what, my next guest is an award-winning journalist and author who recently spent several hours with Lyle Menendez at the Brothers Prison near San Diego. Robert Rand is back with me on the program. Robert, thank you so much for being here tonight. I've been dying to talk to you about your conversation and how it went. Tell me everything. What did Lyle say about these delays and the possibilities of what lies ahead?
Well, the brothers certainly understand why the hearings were delayed because of the wildfires in Southern California, and they send their prayers and support out to all the victims of the fires. And so they've been incarcerated for 35 years, and so 2 more months is okay with them. But they are both upbeat. I visited with Lyle. You can only visit with one inmate at a time. And Lyle Menendez told me that they're both focused on the hearings coming up and looking forward to witnesses from Richard J. Donovan prison and also some of their family members.
So I get it. After 35 years, I suppose patience has become not just a virtue, but just you practice it by rote almost. Do they have a strong feeling one way or the other as to how things will go? Are they feeling different since the new DA has come into office?
Well, I believe that they are both cautiously optimistic and looking forward to presenting their arguments at the evidence hearings in March. There are 2 paths to freedom for them. One is the resentencing, which is the subject of the hearings in March, that only deals with their record in prison and whether or not they are rehabilitated. And the other is a habeas corpus petition hearing, which will look at the new evidence that's come out in the last couple of years. And both the habeas and the resentencing will be decided by Superior Court judges.
So here's another weird question, and I'm not sure what the answer to this is. Early on, when the Netflix series dropped, the word was they were not pleased about how they were depicted. Certain areas of the series they felt were unfair to them. But in the end, that series generated so much support and goodwill for them. Have they changed how they feel about the series? Do they now realize that it has brought a groundswell of support that may actually push the DA?
Well, both the brothers are not allowed to have access to the internet in prison, so neither one's actually seen the series. They've heard about it from their wives and their friends and other people, and they're of course they're happy that people are talking about their case again. But the documentary that really was the source of new evidence in the case was a documentary I was executive producer on, Menendez plus Menudo, Boys Betrayed, that came out in Peacock in 2023, and that's provided the foundation for their habeas petition.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. You don't give a lot of these interviews, so I really respect the fact that you visited me tonight. Robert Rand, look forward to talking again. Thank you.
Okay, Ashley. Thanks.
And again, folks, be sure to check out Robert's book, The Menendez Murders, the shocking untold story of the Menendez family and the killings that stunned the nation. Nobody knows more about this case than Robert. He was there the night of the murders, start to finish. I did not realize this until recently. But there are actually 2 ways to interview prison inmates. There's the old school way, like Robert does. You go, you get permission, you go there, you ask your questions, and you leave. But then there's this other way, one that came to light on this show in real time last month. I was interviewing my NewsNation colleague outside the prison where Luigi Mangione was being held in Pennsylvania, when all of a sudden, the inmates got in on the act. Hi, guys. Say hello to Alex Capriello.
We got you, Alex. Ashleigh says hello.
I can't believe this.
There they are. I can't tell if you can hear this.
Oh, we can hear it. Could we ever? We could see them too. They're blinking lights, blinking to us. And now one of those inmates has written a first-person account of Luigi Mangioni's stay at SCI Huntingdon, including that wild night and the backlash that they faced afterwards. I'll tell you all about it next. One of the biggest true crime stories of last year led to the single most viral moment in the 4-year history of this show. When Luigi Mangioni was arrested in December for the murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, he was briefly held in Pennsylvania till he was sent back to New York. His lockup was called SCI Huntingdon, and NewsNation's Alex Capriello was reporting live outside its walls just after his arrest. When Luigi's fellow inmates saw Alex and his lights, they yelled out their windows that they were watching this show. And soon after that, I realized that if I asked them questions live on the air, they might just hear me on the TVs they had in their cells, and maybe they'd answer me out the windows, which led to the most bizarre interview I've ever conducted.
Earlier today, I was reporting outside this prison wall. So, oh my gosh. I'm not sure if you just heard that, Ashleigh. That was them screaming.
I just waved. Alex, I just waved, and that was the...
Can you hear that?
Hi, guys. Say hello to Alex Capriello.
They said, we got you, Alex. Ashleigh says hello.
I can't believe this.
There they are. I can't tell if you can hear this.
Oh, we can hear it. Was dinner good, yes or no? Rest assured, gentlemen, we can absolutely hear you.
But isn't that interesting, Ashleigh?
You got your interview. Is there doing the strobe light for us? Was that the strobing was for us? If you're just tuning into NewsNation right now, this is the prison inmates at the SCI Huntingdon watching our show and responding by turning their lights on and off to show us that they are, in fact, watching and responding. I take you back to that moment because a news site called the Prison Journalism Project has put up a first-hand account of what happened after that night. It was written by an inmate named Vaughn Wright, housed in the C block at that prison, and Vaughn writes, Banfield started posing questions directly to the prisoners. I haven't heard voices here raised in such raucous unison since Feb 2018 when the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. Though it was hard for Capriello to hear anyone shouting from C block where I live, I suppose people relished the moment to have a voice. Joy Bell Phelan is one of the staff members of the Prison Journalism Project. She herself was incarcerated twice for a total of 7 years. She joins me now live. Joy Bell, thank you for being here. What else did Vaughn write about that night?
Thank you so much for having me, Ashleigh. Vaughn wrote about his experience. That's what we try to do here, and while Luigi was in his prison, what things were like for all of the men in that prison.
So what happened after that raucous night? Did the hammer come down?
It sounds like it. You've read what we've published. We reached out to Vaughn right after your story. We realized we had a writer that could tell us something of what was happening inside. And so Vaughn very much talked about what his observations were. That's what reporting is. And so it was about a chance to share what they were living in while it was happening.
Let me read a little bit of that. This is what you've got from Vaughn. The day after the NewsNation interview with E Block aired, the prison's deputy superintendent threatened everyone in the unit, particularly the guys on the street-facing side, with time in the hole if they yelled from their cell or blinked their lights for the media again. Freedom of speech suppressed? Check. That's quite something. Do we know if it happened anyway? Because the next night they did yell from the windows.
Vaughn hasn't said. We haven't heard from anybody else at the facility. He does still have tablet access, which is how we communicate with him. We have heard from a couple other writers at that facility, so messages are still coming in and out, perhaps not on the same unit. I can't verify that, but I think information is still flowing.
Well, Joy Bell, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm going to have you back again. We've had a lot of breaking news, so we didn't have as long an interview as I would want, but will you come back again?
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
So appreciate it. Joy Bell-Phelan is a writer, relations manager for Prison Journalism Project, and she's also a former inmate, so she knows a lot about what she's speaking. All right. While yesterday's plane crash is really unnerving for anybody who flies, this fact might help put it into perspective. Since the last major U.S. air disaster in 2009, commercial carriers in America have safely transported more than the equivalent of the world's population. Put that in perspective, it means over 150 million flights have taken off and landed safely without incident. And that's a good reminder that airplanes remain one of the safest ways to travel. And if you need something else to lift you out of all the heaviness in the last 24 hours, have I got a moment for you that'll restore your faith in humanity, because it really did for me personally. And I'm going to share it with you next. On this show, we usually bring you the worst of the worst because it's a true crime show. But tonight, something completely different. A reminder that not everybody sucks. Case in point, Kevin Rodriguez. Kevin and his girlfriend found my wallet after I stupidly left it in a gas station restroom on a highway on Monday. There was over $80 in that wallet, along with all my credit cards, my ATM card, even my Nexus pass to cross the border. Kevin could have kept all of it and walked into the sunset. But no, not Kevin Rodriguez. Kevin from the Marcy Projects in Brooklyn, where Jay-Z grew up, decided to do something else. He tracked me down in all the ways he could think of. He reached out to me on Instagram, he reached out to me on X, and it worked. And yesterday I met up with Kevin in Brooklyn, where he handed me back my wallet. Every dollar, every card, completely intact. But Kevin didn't just give me back my wallet. Kevin restored my faith in humanity, because he reminded me that honesty still matters and that integrity is still out there, even among total strangers. And so I leave you with this hashtag tonight. We need more Kevins. So please spread that around. And Kevin, thank you. I promise I will pay it forward. Almost next.
Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation, where left and right come to be reasonable. So tonight we have an exclusive with the father of the American Airlines pilot who died trying to land in Washington, D.C. last night. He was one of the 67 who lost their lives. And we still don't understand why, but we're going to piece clues together tonight. The father is a pilot himself, and he actually flew Black Hawk helicopters. One was involved last night. In fact, he flew the same route that became deadly last night in a Black Hawk helicopter. Now, what are the chances, right? Well, that is a question that his family is struggling with on many levels. So we're going to cover that. And we're also going to cover the confirmation hearings for the three